Since we are all going to be tight on time, so let's start with the webinar. Welcome to our pre-Youth IGF India 2019 webinar series. Topic for today's webinar is what is Internet governance, why youth, and why youth in Internet governance. We welcome Mr. Satish Babu, Chair of the Asia Pacific Regional at-Large Organization, APRALO, at ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. He is also a founder and key organizer of the India School of Internet Governance. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Ahita, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's joined this session. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Youth IGF organizers for this opportunity to talk to some of the upcoming leaders from the youth in the domain of Internet governance. Next slide, please. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we will be discussing several questions related to the Internet and its governance and the role of youth in the process. And specifically, the points that we're going to discuss, we're going to start with the state of the Internet as of now, some of the challenges, then on to what is meant by Internet governance. Then what is the role of youth specifically in the domain of Internet governance? And the last bit about what has been the state of the Internet governance domain within India and perhaps South Asia. Next, please. All of us are aware of this, that the Internet has evolved to be a kind of unified communications bus. Now we talk about data bus and all that in computer science, and this is a communications bus for the whole world. And it, as we will see shortly, it has got open access. There are no entry barriers. Anybody with an appropriate device or a computer can use it. And what do we use it for? We have a number of uses, broadly classified into informational, recreational, educational, transactional. Now, transactional is a very big a bunch of services which involve anything that involves specifically money, the digital economy, or even without money. For example, our cloud-based email like Gmail is also transactional in nature, and also as a tool for collaboration among people who are geographically dispersed. Now, the Internet is an open, distributed network of networks. Of course, that's how the name Internet came up. It has got fuzzy edges, no central control, and does not have a top-down structure. Now, fuzzy edges simply means that unlike a computer facility or a computer center in a college, where there is a system administrator who knows exactly how many machines are there, what do they run Windows or Linux or Mac OS. The Internet, unlike this model, does not have a central control. Nobody knows how many machines are there on a specific day. Computers come in and go out without any barrier, without any restrictions. So we say that the edges of this network are fuzzy. Also, you might have Internet nodes in all kinds of unlikely places, from Antarctica to outer space. So the true boundaries of the Internet is actually quite fuzzy. Next. Now, when you look at the Internet, you realize that it is at once several things. It is at once a medium of communication, a repository of information, and an intelligent resource. Now, medium of communication is something that's very clear. We use it to talk to someone who's somewhere else. We use it as a repository of information. So, like, anything that you want to search about, you have so many search engines that provide information. So, it's considered as a very large library of information, which is easily accessible. And this intelligent resource, if you look at today's world, there are a number of Internet-based resources and services which are not the traditional model. For instance, if you take cloud computing, Earlier, you could only buy a computer. You could not buy half a computer or a quarter of a computer. But on the cloud, you can buy a fractional computer. You can, in an elastic sense, extend the capabilities of your computer in very small increments. Now, this wouldn't have been possible without the internet. So, in fact, we'll see later that some services would have been impossible without the internet. The other thing is that the internet was conceived as free of entry barriers and open to anyone, anywhere. Obviously, 10 years back, we used to talk about the digital divide. So it was not as if everybody had equal access to the internet. But today, we usually do not talk about the digital divide in the original sense. Today, we may talk about the quality of the internet. Everybody does have access, or most people that want to have access do have access, but the quality of the internet may be actually quite patchy. It may vary significantly from person to person, country to country, and so on. An important aspect of the internet is that it enables permissionless innovation. Now, this phrase permissionless innovation is actually quite important, and it sets out today what we believe. Like, if I have an idea that is like a service on the internet, I don't have to take anybody's permission to create that online, and then my market is the whole world. So this permissionless innovation is extremely important in the course of the evolution of the internet, and it does stimulate new forms of economic activity and employment. And later on, we will see that employment could be challenged also because of the internet. But then the internet very clearly also provides new forms of employment. As I said earlier, some of the recent technical developments would have been improbable or impossible without the internet. For instance, cryptocurrencies and the blockchain is completely internet centric. Cloud computing, artificial intelligence, a service like Uber, these all are virtually impossible without the internet. Uh, and finally, an important aspect of the internet is that while it allows for instant, anywhere, anytime, anyone communications, it's also very cost effective. It is so cheap as to be virtually free in many cases. You pay for the access, but you don't pay for anything beyond that. And also, when I say anywhere, anytime, anyone, that word anyone does not mean it's all about human beings. It's no longer about human beings alone. There are all kinds of devices and things on the internet, which takes it beyond. So the anyone is actually anything as well. Next. Now, these were the good things about the internet, but we also have many challenges as the internet becomes a universal service that we use for all kinds of things. There is also an escalation of vulnerabilities uh, regarding or relating to the use of the internet. The first and foremost, and something that's been in the news recently, is that of the loss of privacy and anonymity, and the need for data protection. Now, when you attend the Youth IGF, there will be some discussions around data protection, what it means, and why are we talking about it. This has become after the European GDPR. This is now a hot topic even in India, and we have our draft, the new act, the Indian Act on Data Protection, which is going to come up shortly in Parliament. There's been a lot of discussions around it. It's not perfect. There are some critiques of the act, the draft bill. The next is large-scale data breaches, data abuse, cybercrime, scams. Especially when in a country like India, you have a large number of neo-literates, first-generation technology users joining the internet. Some of them become vulnerable to the information that they get through the internet, which they believe implicitly. So this has given rise to all kinds of issues in the past. But data breaches, of course, are very deliberate intrusion attempts, and the leakage of data has become a huge challenge. National security. So state surveillance and weaponization and a bunch of other areas relating to it we find that in many countries, governments regulate, or without the legal, the legal provisions in being in place, uh, in terms of internet shutdowns and restrictions and censorship and surveillance. And the reason provided is a blanket national security. Now, as an individual, what do we balance national security with? So, suppose we want to argue that, look, you can't shut down the internet for a very long time, and the government says no, we have to do it because it's a matter of national security. What is the other side of it? The other side of it is the public interest. Now, you have to have a balance between national interest and national security and public interest. So this is something that we have to educate more people on. Otherwise, people do not even know that there is something that you have to counterbalance. Then, of course, a bunch of things under fake news, hate speech, cyber stalking, cyberbullying, child safety. Now, at one level, these are individual issues that you get cyber stalked, and but at another level, like fake news, has an impact over how democracy itself functions. So that is very serious. If the entire elections, for example, of a country gets influenced, whether the influence is minor or major is a different issue. But if the internet can influence uh, citizens to behave in a certain way, then we have an issue about it. There are issues of jurisdiction, geopolitical issues, data ownership, data localization, and of course, a new development which is open data. These are related but not identical areas. One important thing here is data localization, which has been in the news, even in India, because the data localization goes against the principle or the spirit of, for instance, the cloud computing. The cloud computing says we will make it very efficient. We will put up data centers in countries or regions where it is the cheapest. In fact, people have said put up data centers in Siberia because you don't have to spend electricity on cooling because Siberia is already cold. Now, that efficiency is a global process. You're optimizing efficiency at a global level. But data localization is counter to that because data localization says you have to host all the data of the citizens of a country in that country. Now, this reduces the flexibility of companies, and for that reason, they object. So, currently in India, also, we have this debate going on. Then, diversity and support for diversity, whether it's gender, geographic, cultural, linguistic, etc., is an issue. The good news here is that there has been quite some development in the internationalized domain names. So, domain name, we are aware of it, like www.google.com. But what if we want a domain name in Hindi? Say, I want to have a website called namaskar.bharat in Devanagari. It was not possible until a few years back. But today, it is possible to register a domain called namaskar.bharat in Devanagari or in a bunch of other languages in India, Indian or Neo-Brahmi scripts. And an associated thing is the universal acceptance. Now, suppose I'm registering on Indian Railways irctc.co.in site, and they ask me for my email. Can I enter Satish at namaskar.bharat in Devanagari? Many websites do not accept that because they say this is an invalid email ID. But it's a valid email ID because the domain names are valid. So there is a bit of a gap there, and many software platforms are unable to handle these kind of email IDs. They're unable to validate them, they're unable to accept them, store them, and use them. Now, the initiative that is addressing this issue is called universal acceptance. And the objective of universal acceptance is that any email in any script of any length should be acceptable for any use. Where email is required, any kind of email should work. So this is something that is of importance to India specifically and Asia in particular. And there has been some progress happening on this. Another bunch of things have to do with the whole artificial intelligence, IoT, automation of these devices, autonomous decision making by computers. algorithmization, wherein there is a alienation of human beings from this whole thing, and machines take decisions. Uh, Now, in some ways, this makes things more efficient, faster, but in some other ways there are issues of bias and all other kinds of issues which maybe you'll be encountering some of them during the YIGF. There's also the issue of employment loss. For instance, Uber. In many parts of the world, Uber does not operate because the local cab drivers object to it. In some states in India, for instance, Goa, Uber cannot operate because the local taxi drivers have said it will result in loss of our employment. Now, this is a tricky balance which has to be handled sensitively. Another bunch of things have to do with the energy used in computing and the impact of computing on the environment and climate change. Now, we are normally indiscriminate in the use of computers. When you go to Google and search, we don't think that this search is going to cause X grams of carbon dioxide into the air emissions. But that's actually the case. Any search we do, any computer activity that we do, has impact not only on the client machine that I am using, but also in the backend that Google is using. So there is actually an impact on climate change. And some other activities like Bitcoin, for example, where Bitcoin mining is going on, there are huge impacts on the climate. So the climate debate has become, quite a very, I mean, it's a very powerful force now. People are having climate anxiety, and climate action is been called for by almost every country. So we have to consider the impact of the energy use in computing and the internet on its effects on the climate as well. And finally, we have several issues related to the digital identity. Now, this is a futuristic thing. Digital identity, digital rights, digital citizenship, digital economy, digital democracy, and digital life. These are related and overlapping. And I'm not getting into details, but this is actually the future. There are some threats here like identity theft. There are issues of how rights are going to be, enforced on the cyberspace. Uh, what is the digital citizenship? How do I become a full-fledged citizen? Now, some countries have already started this concept of digital citizenship, where you don't have to live in that country, but you can be a citizen of that country electronically. Digital economy is well known, of course. Digital democracy. Can you have a kind of democracy where you can directly, instead of having the representative-based democracy, can you have a direct voting? What are the security issues and so on, and this fake news kind of impacting how people think. So these are all fused into something called digital life, which is something that the youth are going to be especially interested in, because it's going to unfold over the next many decades. Next. Okay, this is the state of the internet. Now, what is internet governance? Now, you must be having a broad idea about this. It's formulating rules, policies, standards, and practices that coordinate and manage the cyberspace. Cyberspace consists of people, devices, entities, computers. Now, entities are a broad term for they are autonomous agents that operate in cyberspace. Some of them are called bots, others are called agents. So the point is that we have to globally we have to see how we can manage and coordinate these kind of things on the internet, and also in order to enable the productive and safe use of the internet, address challenges, and permit adoption of technology innovations. The technology on the internet is always evolving, so internet governance has also to think of how we can adopt on a continuing, ongoing basis new technology. Now, unusually, internet is a global resource that has a very wide and diverse variety of users or stakeholders. Now, this is unlike perhaps any other resource, and the closest that I can come to is the high seas or the oceans, which have many users, from small fishermen to militaries to very large tankers. So and the internet is actually even more diverse than that. So internet governance should be therefore decentralized, inclusive, bottom up, and consensus based. Practically, I mean, the reason is that we are having all kinds of entities on the internet. Human beings from small villages to big towns to the governments to big businesses, big tech. So, what kind of a governance mechanism do you have that will not only be inclusive but also ensure that everybody's voices are heard? Also, knowing that no single entity controls the internet governance actually is practically the responsibility of a whole ecosystem of organizations that work together, and we will see that in the next slide. And the most effective governance model of internet governance is considered to be the multi-stakeholder model, where these multiple stakeholders, so businesses, civil society, governments, research institutions, they all come together. They all have a seat on the table. Now, what is a contrasting model? A contrasting model would be the multilateral model, which is the model used by the UN system. Now, in the UN system, all countries come together to form the United Nations, and they take decisions there. But unfortunately, the problem with the UN system is that an end user on the internet or a small fisherman who's using the sea for fishing and for his and her subsistence, they don't have a role. So just like the end user on the internet, the end user in the case of the sea oceans is the small fisher. Now, the multilateral model has no space for this kind of individuals. It is only space for nations or countries or states. So this is a very major difference. And I'm aware, I mean, I have some background in fisheries, and I am aware of very monumental legislation, UN legislation. For example, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, that took 20 years, but to develop from end to end. But it never gave a space for one of the stakeholders to go and talk about how they are going to be impacted. Whereas the multi-stakeholder model is open, and it allows anybody, any end user representative or end users themselves, to make their voices heard. So that is a very significant difference in the way these two models work. There are also other differences, like for example, the responsiveness. Now, the internet is a fast evolving space. We don't have 20 years to make a policy on the internet. It's got to be done much faster. So, in contrast with the multilateral system, the multi-stakeholder system is also considerably more responsive. Next. Now, I'm not going to get into details here. This is, unfortunately, some of it is too small to read. This is ecosystem that governs the internet. It is a whole lot of organizations and individuals as well. And like I said, no single organization is in command. And all these organizations work hand in hand. And as you get into the Youth IGF, you will hear of organizations like ICANN and Internet Society and W3C and IETF and all that. They're all represented in this chart, and you can take a look at this at your leisure. Next. Now we come to the role of youth. Why do we have something specific and special for youth within the domain of internet governance? So, historically speaking, today's youth are in a unique position because they are the digital natives who constitute the digital generation. People of my generation, for instance, were not born into technology. And even today, many of people in my generation are unable to relate to technology. But that's not the case with youth. Youth, while being the adults of tomorrow and future leaders, they're also technology-wise very savvy, and they know exactly what technology is and how it can be used and abused. So that way, they are in a very good position to talk about the governance of this technology because they have been users from very early days. They are also the most important consumers of technology and also the producers of technology solutions and innovations, because many of them are also involved in producing these solutions. Now, youth are a very influential force, socially, culturally, and politically. And when they come together, like we saw in the case of climate change, it could be very powerful. and very difficult to resist by the rest of the world. So, in that sense, they are movers and shakers. Youth are a resource that have high energy, creativity, and conviction, and exactly the same that we saw in Thunberg's address in the UN. Now, youth also think differently, and they are not. They are less prone to the whole echo chamber effects. That means, you talk to people that think similar to you, and you never hear of a different opinion, and therefore you're closed in. Whereas youth are exposed to different kinds of influences, and they draw their own conclusions. And sometimes it's very important to think differently, and the youth are in a position to do that. So, because of all these reasons, in internet governance, youth are given a special place, and it is believed that they have a high potential to contribute. And we have been seeing many young people come forward in internet governance, both for now and for the future. Next. So we will also during the YIGF look at or see many opportunities and some challenges that you might face as youth while coming into the realm of internet governance. Many mainstream institutions provide special opportunities for youth. So you have special organizations themselves for youth. There are youth communities and initiatives, the youth fellowships, the youth internet governance schools and academies like APIGA, which happens every year in South Korea. It's a joint effort of the South Korean government and ICANN, and it's specifically for the young people, just like YouthIGF in India is. However, there are also some challenges, especially when youth are going to enter the domain of internet governance. There is a very steep learning curve. There are a number of acronyms that you might never have heard of, uh, and there are concepts. There is history, and without knowing at least some of this, you may not be able to function effectively. It might require a lot of time and resource constraints. Many of these international processes have meetings, and meetings are very expensive in terms of travel. And currently, there's also this whole issue of the carbon emissions while you travel. Air travel is a very significant contributor to carbon emissions. So, how does one participate? So, the good news here is that most of these meetings have remote participation facilities. Uh, so, you can actually be wherever you are and still participate. Of course, there are the issues of time zones. You'd maybe past midnight when this meeting is taking place in some other time zone, some other part of the world. So there are also these restrictions or limitations of cultural practices, the language, time zones, etc. Even accent can become a problem. Uh, some people may have difficulty in following the accents of some countries or etc. Now, these are, of course, broad, sweeping generalizations, but these could become a factor. Next. So, so lastly, we talk about internet governance in India. Now, internet use in India has grown rapidly, as you're aware, and as of now, India offers the cheapest internet bandwidth anywhere in the world. So that's a good thing. However, the participation in internet governance of our internet governance practitioner community is actually much less than or much below its by proportion of the population. And prior to 2014, India's participation in internet governance was largely from the government, a few industries in the space, and some NGOs. In particular, the end users were not represented at all. But since that time, 2014, there have been many developments. This include the INSIG, the India School on Internet Governance, which is founded in 2016, and this year it is in its fourth edition. The Youth IGF, which was established last year, 2018. Many Internet Society chapters, which have become now very active. Several new NGOs have entered the domain, and in society at large, there is a rising awareness about the opportunities of the internet and its challenges inherent within the space of the internet. Next. Next. So this is my last slide. So given the importance of the internet, both opportunities and challenges, it's important that more youth are facilitated into the domain of internet governance. Uh, we realize that effective participation in these global processes required a lot of perseverance, dedication, and time, and maybe even resources. But the earlier you enter the domain, the better, because you'll be able to understand many of this. The I mean, like what you mentioned as learning curve, the concepts and the practices and the principles in internet governance. The earlier you encounter these, the better. Now, from the side of INSIG and the Youth IGF, we seek to facilitate the entry of youth into internet governance and into the internet governance community in India, but not just in India, but also in Asia, South Asia, Asia Pacific, and the whole global community. Now, this is a very close knit community, and you might find the same people in many places. So, our task is to help you into this community and see that or support you in becoming productive. At the same time, this is not about global processes alone. It's also about local processes. So the youth, especially youth IGF participants, we expect them to also be active in their own local communities, whichever part of the country you come from, so that whatever you learn from these global processes, you're able to pass on to the local communities, and you become a kind of conduit for information flow up and down. Next. So I will stop here, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. We are now open to questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can ask sir directly by raising your hand. Thank you. Okay, there's one question, sir, from Kapil Goyal. Yes, please. I'll unmute you now. Kapil, can you please ask a question?
Hi.
Yeah, please go ahead.
My concern is that how to deal with the internet shutdown issue.
Right. Thanks for the question. So shutdown is something that both INSIG and perhaps YIGF have been discussing for the last several editions. Like I said, there is a balance to be achieved between national security and the public interest. Now, having internet is a matter of public interest because everybody is dependent on it. At the same time, we understand national security. Now, how best to balance these two? Now, there have been several suggestions that have come up, which I will not get into detail, but some of them include: one is to have a proper legal framework for shutdown. That means there has to be a judicial process, meaning the courts have to be involved and there has to be a clear. The executive cannot unilaterally take a shutdown decision. That's one suggestion. The second is that there has to be a consultative process. So if in a state or a district you have to impose a shutdown for whatever reasons, there has to be prior intimation, there has to be some community process where people are taken into confidence and the reason for the shutdown communicated, the duration communicated, etc. Now, this has to be, now how will you implement these things? That's a challenge that we have. It can only be achieved if there is discussion, debate at the grassroots, and we're able to articulate this to the government and to all the agencies, and including perhaps to the courts. So there have been some progress. For example, last month there was a decision by the High Court of the Government of Kerala, which declared that internet is an essential service. This happened because one of the girls who was staying in a girls' hostel, the hostel authorities had said there's no way you can use internet after some time, I think 6 p.m. or something like that. So she went to the High Court, and this case was actually facilitated by one of our community members. And the High Court, at the end of it, decided, no, you can't do this, and asked the hostel not to impose any restrictions. So that's a progressive step. Now, the moment you have more such decisions, maybe things will change. But we see the problem here, which is national security has become a bugbear, meaning it is actually overriding everything else. But what we are arguing is that national security must be balanced with the public interest. I hope it helps.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions? All right. So if there are any more questions, kindly drop them in the chat, or and then we'll put them through Satish sir after the call. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Thank you for covering the basics of internet governance, the challenges, the importance of youth in internet governance, and the status of internet governance in India. Thank you so much. Yes, there's a question, sir. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself since the call is being recorded, and then ask the question. Yes, Vishnu Priya, please ask your question.
Handling fake news and rumors in social medias.
Right. Thank you for the question. This is again a complex area. There's been a lot of debate about how to handle fake news. Now, there has been several technical solutions proposed, but the point is that the technical solutions may not be sufficient. They probably have to be, for instance, WhatsApp. You get a message on WhatsApp and you forward it to people without considering if this is true or false or what it is, without ascertaining the veracity of the particular news. So, since this problem came up, now WhatsApp has restricted the number of forwards you can do. So, and the forward is very clearly indicated as forward, not as fact. But the actual the issue is that we are still at the beginning of the whole issue of fake news and rumors. So there has to be concerted effect, and we have been discussing this in our INSIG as well as I think YIGF. I am not going to offer any specific solution, but I'm just going to say that please raise this question also during the YIGF process, and you will have experts there who will be able to at least answer part of provide you part of the answers. I am myself not an expert in this particular area, but I'm saying there has been sufficient, discussion and debate, and we will continue to be evolving, moving towards a solution.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Arun. Do you have a question for sir? I'll unmute you now.
Yeah. I have a question. How to tackle with the video content which may be anti-national or which may be having hating speech, because it is very difficult for an algorithm to detect such kind of content. But there is a lot of video or audio content on a lot of websites or YouTube which is anti-national. How can we tackle with the same?
Right. Thank you for the question. The question is about anti-national content. So now, generally, this is handled through the intermediary. So, like the intermediary in many cases, like YouTube or MetaCafe or whichever or PeerTube, whichever you're using. Now, all these platforms provide for reporting of objectionable content. So if you think that content now, so far the YouTube in the last several months have been hypersensitive to this, and there are complaints that even innocent videos have been taken off because of complaints. So we still have to strike a balance. So just because I don't like somebody's video, I can't claim that it is anti-national or it should be taken off. So currently that judgment is left to the platform or the intermediary, which is actually not really correct, because how does YouTube judge this sort of a thing? They're not there to judge. They're a technology platform. So there's a bit of an anomaly there if you expect YouTube to judge all these complaints. The other route, of course, is the judicial route. If you can go to the court and establish that this content is indeed anti-national, YouTube will obey that court order. Not only YouTube, every content provider, every intermediary will obey any decision of the court. But you have to go through that process. So the two options available are: one is reporting in the platform, but there the risk is that the judgment is left to the platform to do, which may not be the best. The other is to go to the court as an individual. Now, of course, the governments have other things to do. Governments can directly tell or inform or order the platform to remove such content. But as an individual, if we have a problem, these are the two routes currently available to us.
Thank you so much, sir. We can take one more question, and then if you have any further questions, we'll send them through Satish sir after the call. Just one more question or comment. Okay, since we are short of time, thank you so much, Satish sir, for your presentation and for taking time out to enlighten all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you so much, sir. Right. So now I will be talking to you about giving you a brief about our event, about Youth IGF India, and uh, and our upcoming event, and take a few questions towards the end of my talk. So the purpose of Youth IGF India and our vision is to improve the young people's understanding of global and regional internet policies. And we also provide a platform for young people to raise and discuss policies that affect them within the cyber domain. Um, we also guide them to the right opportunities available for them to take a deeper dive into IG discussions, IG internet governance, and we feel it's really important for you to understand the intersection between technology and policy for more informed policy making and technology development. So this is another focus area. And as Satish sir mentioned during his talk, we are the digital natives and we are the producers and consumers of technology. And so through Youth IGF India, we are providing a platform and creating a network of the next generation of internet leaders who can take informed decisions for the betterment of the internet. Right. So last year was our first edition of Youth IGF India. It was held at university in Delhi, Indira Gandhi Delhi Technological University for Women. It was on 12th October, and we saw participation of over 100 youth, with majority of them being women. During the event, we covered the basics and fundamentals of internet governance, the working of the internet, several hot topics of discussion on IG, and discussed and informed the students and participants on the engagement opportunities for them post Youth IGF India. This year as well, we're very proud to announce that we're organizing the second edition on 14th November 2019 at St. Xavier's University in Kolkata, in India. We will have sessions to create and strengthen your foundation in internet governance. Couple, could you please mute the microphone? Yes, sorry. So this year, as I mentioned, we're organizing the second edition of 14 November at St. Xavier's University in Kolkata, and we will be discussing to help you strengthen your foundation in internet governance. In internet governance, have interactive activities for you to understand the working of the internet, the multi-stakeholder model of discussion, as Satish sir mentioned, panel discussion on privacy and safeguards of the internet, and engagement in IG post our event. We will be opening the registrations for the event soon, and we request you to keep looking out for the registration applications. We have selected 20 fellows, and we would like to congratulate them over this call, and we're very happy to support them for their travel and accommodation for our event this year. Just a note, since this is a webinar series, we are organizing a couple of webinars before the event, and we've distributed webinars throughout the year till our next event next year. The webinars will be we'll be discussing hot topics in IG such as fake news, content regulation, data localization, privacy, anonymity, human rights, blockchain. A lot of these topics will be discussed, and these are discussed to basically help you understand the topic, the challenges associated with these topics, and how we can all work towards a solution. So I'd request you all to please watch out for notifications about the webinar and any other information regarding our event. Kindly join our mailing list available at our website. We are also available on various social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Please unmute your mics, please. Yeah. So we are available on various social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we have shared the details. Praneeth, who's also a part of our organizing team, has shared the details on the Zoom chat. So please connect. I would like to share the screen and show you the website if you've not already gone through it. Just a second. Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes, Ihita.
Okay, just a second. Yeah. So this is our website. This is the YouthIGF India website, and as you scroll down, you will see our timeline, and this is where you have the information of joining our mailing list and Facebook group. So we send most of our information through the mailing list, the important ones, but I encourage you to join all our social media platforms for updates, regular updates. So you join using the join now button. If you want to know about a past edition, you can go to the tab above. It says Youth IGF India 2018. So you can read upon our articles that were published as a blog on the Internet Society website and AppNec website. To know more about fellowship, you can find out the people who've been selected. You'll get all the updates regarding fellowship on the fellowship page. And so this is, for more information, please just explore the website. You will get an idea as to what we are actually doing. And if you have any questions regarding our event, please ask now or put them in your Zoom chat, and we are ready to help you. Yeah. Are there any questions or comments or suggestions that you would like to share with us, please? Right. So Abhishek, you've asked a question. So registration link will be for the people who are from in and around the event area, in and around Kolkata, for local registrations. The registrations are also open for everybody across India. With fellowship, we fund based on the students' application or the participants' application. We fund them with the travel support and accommodation for a single night during the event. So we haven't opened the registrations yet, Abhishek. So we'll be opening them in a couple of days, and please join our social media to find out and get an update on the same.
Ihita, we have one question for the last talk for Satish sir from Devdutt, if we can take it now.
Sure. Let's, yeah.
Yeah, Devdutt, would you like to speak for yourself? Right. So I think I can take his question. Satish sir, this question is for you. Devdutt says laws are being manipulated to torture or legally strangle technology companies. If this is the case, how can one expect to build innovative solutions? Have issues with internet due to which a transcript of sir's answer will be of great help here. Yeah, that's his question.
Thanks very much for the question. So for the second part, the transcript, I think there'll be a recording available, so you can use that in lieu of a transcript. Regarding the first part, the question of the laws being used to strangle. Now, I'm not aware of a very broad complaint on these lines. That is, there are laws that are being misused or abused to strangle, because I myself work in the IT industry. and we have a fairly vibrant, community of within the industry, and there is progress happening in terms of financial performance and so on. But if you mean things like intermediary liability, intermediary liability refers to the responsibility of a platform. For instance, there's a blog and somebody has come and left a comment on the blog, and that comment is offensive to somebody, and they go and complain, and there is a order to take down the entire blog. Now, this sort of thing, this is actually not. First thing to realize is that we are still in the first generation of handling these kind of problems. So, how do you distinguish between a specific comment on a single blog entry versus the entire platform? So, if you have a complaint on one comment made against one blog entry, and somebody goes to court and gets a takedown order, that takedown order may apply to the entire platform itself. There are thousands of comments and thousands of posts; all of them are taken down. So, could be taken down. So we are still grappling with the first generation of this level, this kind of complaint. If this is what you mean, so there are actually legal solutions, and there will be speakers at YIGF who are from the legal background, who will be able to tell you exactly what we're trying to do to avoid these kind of cases. Now, is the platform liable for this? Well, opinions differ on that. Some people feel that the platform did not do anything more than just create a platform for others to post, and just because one person has posted something negative, is a platform responsible? So currently the law says because the person who might have posted may be anonymous, so it is an indirect responsibility or a liability of the platform itself. So this is actually going to gradually change, but as of now we do have some problems in handling this kind of complaints. Or there is a picture or there's a photograph of somebody, and this is to be taken down. But we also have a situation where, in some cases, where the platform is abroad, the government of India or the courts in India have no jurisdiction there. In that case, we cannot take it down at all. So this is a global problem, but also a local problem within the country. And the legal people, the lawyers who are with us, there's one person who will be there in the YGF who will be speaking on this area. So you can raise this question again there and get a response from him on the specific issue of intermediary liability. I hope this helps.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Any other questions or comments for sir or for me regarding the logistics and in our event? Okay. So Sneha has shared the registration for our next webinar. So please watch out for information like this. And we'll be offering the next webinar next week around this time. And we'll be discussing on hot topics. This webinar was focused on giving you an understanding of internet governance and the challenges. We'll be diving a little deeper into topics such as cybersecurity and fake news. So so I just like to say that we are a youth-led organization, and we are really looking forward to an enthusiastic audience, and we're here to help you, support you, guide you, and please do contact us, get in touch with us, attend the event. We will also be providing remote participation. So yes, and if there are any questions, please ask us now, or drop us a mail by joining our mailing ID through our website. Okay, then thank you so much, Satish sir. Thank you so much for your presentation, for your support. Thank you all for joining the call. I am really looking forward to all of you joining our next webinar next week. We'll be sharing the information soon. Please get in touch with us, contact us, and we will be also sharing some documents and information brochures or any courses that we find for you to understand internet governance and the challenges better. Yes, so we're looking forward. Thank you so much, and keep in touch.
Thank you. Thanks and bye.